All right, you're listening to episode 6 of the Thunderclap, the St. Luke's student-produced podcast about life on the Hilltop, brought to you by Eye of the Storm. I'm Macy Millones alongside Catherine Clark, and today we'll be talking to Miss Gabriele. We're going to be talking to her about her wonderful cheese club, her hobby of creating, and potentially eating cheese as well.
Woo How are you this morning?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here. I'm so honored to be
we're glad
invited.
to have you. So I love cheese just as much as the next person, but it has never crossed my mind to actually make my own. So how did you get involved with the cheese making process, like, to begin with?
That's a good question, because I keep thinking, when did this all start? And I think it started when my youngest daughter graduated from St. Luke's. So she graduated from St. Luke's, went to college, and I was home, and I had my hobbies. I had knitting and things like that, and I was a runner, but I thought, it would be interesting to try something new. And I had found a recipe on the internet about making yogurt. I hadn't even thought about cheese at that point. So I thought, well, this is kind of cool. I didn't realize you could make your own yogurt. And the one thing that was really bothering me was every time I bought yogurt, all the little cups, I just felt like environmentally, like there's a lot of plastic here. And I thought there's got to be a better way to do this, and could I possibly just do this on my own? So I made some yogurt, and it came out amazing. Like amazing. Like once you have homemade yogurt, you will never,
you don't go back.
ever buy yogurt again. So I got hooked on that and went a little crazy. My children call it the yogurt phase, because that's all we ate. Every meal was yogurt, and I was giving away yogurt. And I thought, I started reading a lot of different articles, and I always called yogurt the gateway drug into cheese making, because once you start, the bug kind of bites you.
It just can't stop.
You just keep going. And so I started, there's a really wonderful website, newenglandcheesemaking.com. And I started looking at recipes on that and trying a couple basic ones. And it was actually my high school history teacher, who I'm still in touch with, who I just adore. She was a huge influence on me. And she had been teaching historical cooking classes up in my hometown in New Hampshire. And one of the, we were talking, and she was telling me that one of the episodes she was doing was about some colonial cheeses she was making. And I thought, that's really, really cool. And I was a history major. I love history. And so we started talking, and I made one of the cheeses that she had made, and it turned out great. And that kind of got the ball rolling. So from there, I took some classes. I enrolled in a cheese-making class in Western Massachusetts that was for a whole weekend, and I just started meeting some really wonderful, interesting people, and that's kind of where it all started, and it's just kept going. And from there, I met a New Canaan mom, a St. Luke's mom, who has a farm, and she's really into cheese making. So the two of us have been doing this together for the past couple years now, and making a lot of cheese.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's interesting how you did this before COVID too. So because of COVID, you have an opportunity to go deeper into your interest, and that's great.
Very much so. I as I look back, and I keep a journal of all the cheeses I make, which is what you really want to do, because when you can then, when you break one out and try it, if it's really good, you can recreate those conditions. So you want to take really meticulous notes of what it was like the day you made it, what was the temperature, humidity, what was going on. And so when the cows during COVID continued to give milk, we were kind of, at our homes doing nothing. I think I cataloged, we made about 100 pounds of cheese.
Wow.
Right now that is aging in my cheese room. So it'll be great in about 6 months, 2 years. We'll have a lot of cheese.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, the listeners want to know what your favorite type of cheese is.
That's an interesting question, because I have what I call my cheese whiz theory, and the Cheese Club knows this. We talk about this, that I think any cheese is great, depending upon who you're eating it with and where you're eating it. So my cheese whiz philosophy is that cheese whiz can be fabulous cheese on top of a mountain with your best friends watching the sunset. I'm all about cheese whiz. Or it can be a delectable camembert as well. So I think it depends on who you're with and where you are. Velveeta can taste good if you're with good friends, and that's my cheese whiz theory. So there's no one particular cheese. I think it's the setting and the people and the mood and the vibe. So don't underestimate the power of cheese whiz.
Yes. I couldn't agree more.
Well, cheese whiz, saltines, and friends, it's all good.
Life's great with more cheese.
That's right.
Okay, so you already talked a little bit about the process of making cheese, but what would you say is the hardest part?
I would say the hardest part, and for this is what I'm really grateful for, because it has taught me patience and it's taught me how to manage disappointment. We all sort of just deal with disappointment in life, but you can think you have made the most incredible wheel of cheese and everything has gone right, and then you put it away for 2 years and you pull it back out and you're reading your notes about the day you made that cheese and you were in such a good mood and the cow was happy that the milk came from, and you open it up and it's horrible. And so you have to learn that sometimes things don't work out the way you think they're going to, but that's also okay. That I think that part of that is you learn. You learn that maybe different conditions would have been better. And so it's a great lesson, I think, that disappointment, I think, is a fabulous teacher. And I think cheese can be, you can get very arrogant and ahead of yourself when it comes to cheese, because if the cow had a bad day, the milk is going to be not the best milk for the cheese. It's amazing how everything has to go right. The cultures need to be working together with temperature, with acidity, with the pH balance. And honestly, I'm not kidding. If a cow has had a fight with another cow, it will affect the way the milk tastes.
Yeah.
So it's you can have cows, for example, that graze closer to the ocean will have a saltier tasting milk, which will affect cheese. So it's amazing how animals that the flavor of the milk will affect the cheese, and you never know what's going to happen. So it's a long process. It can be incredibly disappointing, and then sometimes when you think there is no way this thing's going to work out, this is just going to be awful, it turns out to be incredible. So it's a little bit of a hit or miss, and it teaches you patience and it teaches you persistence, I think.
That's great. Yeah, I thought you were going to say the hardest part was finding a nice cow, a nice happy cow.
Yeah, sometimes the cows can be a little they can
a little judgmental.
Yeah, they can
going
be
through
a
teenage phase.
Yeah, they can be. Yeah, it's like dealing with some unruly teenagers once in a while.
That's great.
I'm wondering. I'm picturing you like. Since I know nothing about really the cheese making process, I'm almost picturing you kind of rolling a wheel like up a hill. Like, how does this wheel come
to
be?
To try that. Yeah, that's good. So what you want to do, it's often the more milk you start with, the better, because you actually want a larger amount. The mass of the cheese will age better if you're using more milk. So you actually generally I start with about 4 to 5 gallons of milk, fresh. It's often been milk from the cow that morning, or, a couple within the next day, the previous day. So the milk gets heated to a certain temperature depending upon the type of cheese that you're making. And then you add what is called cultures. And I buy cultures from all over the world. So I have cultures that have come from France, from Italy, Denmark, and so depending upon what cheese you're making, you will use different cultures and different combinations of cultures. And the cultures are live organisms, and that heat activates them, and they start talking to each other, they start having a little party, and it starts changing the milk. And you let that sit at a warm temperature for generally about an hour or so, and then you add what's called rennet. And rennet is the liquid. It's often liquid, although rennet can come in different forms. I've been experimenting actually last summer. I have a greenhouse which has fig trees in it, and I have been reading some historical documents about cheesemakers in Europe that used the bark of a fig tree to actually solidify the milk, and it worked. And I thought, well, this is kind of cool. I'm going to try this. So then you add rennet, which is you can have a vegetarian rennet. Generally, rennet is from the lining. It comes from the lining of a cow, of the stomach of the cow. And that's what actually curdles the milk and creates it into a solid form. So you add that rennet. That makes the milk a solid. It's kind of, it feels a little bit like Jell-O. That's what the consistency is. And then you cut that, so you have this huge block, 5 gallons of milk. It's like a big Jell-O block.
Yeah.
And then you cut that into squares with something that's called a cheese harp, and it's kind of elongated, rectangular metal device which has a crisscross pattern in it, and that cuts the curds. That's what it becomes. That solid, it becomes a huge cheese curd. You cut those into little curds. You cook those curds, and they separate. The curds separate from the whey, and that's it's the byproduct of the milk once it becomes solidified. So the solids get separated from the liquid. This would be I keep saying I need Mr. Labrie to come in and teach the chemistry of this, because I was terrible at chemistry. But there's a lot of chemistry when it comes to cheese making.
So milk contains lots and lots of proteins. About 80% of these proteins are bound into little globules called micelles. And on these are casein micelles, and on the outside of the micelle is the kappa casein, which is negatively charged. So all micelles have an exterior negative charge, and similar to like poles on a magnet, repel each other. So they stay far apart in the suspended in the milk, and the milk is a liquid. Rennet contains the enzyme chymosin, which is able to cut the negative kappa tail off of the casein micelle. All right, this allows the micelles then to coagulate, no longer being negatively charged on the outside, to form into curds or junkets.
So you separate the curds from the whey, and the curds you then take and put into a cheese press. And that was one of my first presents my kids got me at Christmas when I got into cheese making, a beautiful cheese press from Appalachia that was handmade.
Yeah, I was just about to ask, what was your family's reaction when you came home with the cheese press?
Well, my family thinks I'm nuts anyway, right? I mean, my kids, they were the ones that were embarrassed when I bought my treadmill desk that's in my office. That you guys all see. They were like, she's crazy. So they knew I was losing my mind anyway, this midlife crisis of cheese making. But they encouraged it. So they bought me a wonderful cheese press. So all those curds go into the press, and they go under tremendous pressure. So you've got heat and you have pressure. And, again, generally heat and pressure, you're going to fall apart, right? Like in school, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm losing my mind. And with cheese, it actually becomes this beautiful, solid, almost like a butter consistency under that pressure. And so that will sit in a press, again, depending upon the cheese that you're making, it can sit for a couple days. Then it comes out of the press, and it sits and it dries for a couple days. It goes into a salt bath. So it's to make cheese, you go to the grocery store and you start to see cheese at like $25 a pound, and you think, this is so expensive. Mm-hmm. If you make cheese, you totally get why it's $25 a pound, because it's a long, long process.
Yeah.
And then you put it away in a cheese cave, and it can age for, it can age 2 to 8 years. It can be 6 months, again, depending upon the cheese. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then you never know what you're going to get when you open it up.
Nice. Nice.
We're wondering what the Cheese Club is, how it started, what you do, what it's like mid-COVID, all that.
Yeah, it's been a challenge with COVID. So the Cheese Club started last year. It was a bunch of seniors who got together. Well, actually, I would say the interest came the year before. So the year before, Mr. Davis was on sabbatical, and I was acting head of school, and I gave a meditation during that time about trying new things. And this is, as Mr. Davis was trying new things on a sabbatical, this would be a good chance for students to try new things. And one of the things I had done was cheese making as a crazy hobby. So I gave that meditation, and a bunch of kids came to me after that saying, that's really cool. I've thought about trying this hobby, or I've tried to try that. And a couple kids came and said, we love cheese, we want to make a cheese club. And I thought, well, that's fine, go ahead, set it up. Nobody's going to join this cheese club, right? It's crazy. But we had a lot of kids turn up. And so last year we were sampling. I would bring in a lot of cheeses that I had made, and we sampled, and we would be able to taste the good ones and the bad ones. I mean, it was important to understand why the ones that we didn't like, what was it about them that we didn't like, and how might we change the recipes of that. So that was pretty popular last year. Then, of course, COVID hit. And we have a cheese club this year, but it's been really hard to get together and actually have those samples.
Yeah.
I've done an online course, so I've done a Facebook Live class and had some of the Cheese Club members were on that, which I'd love to do, with more students if they have any interest. So
I bet a bunch of people would be interested.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool.
Do you have a favorite cheese or one that you're working on at the moment that you're excited about?
I have two. I have some interesting parmesans that I have just made. I've made parmesan before, but this one I tweaked a little bit. But there's actually a new cheese that I've never tried before, which is called Imaruli, which is a Russian cheese. I've never made Russian cheese before, and that's a soft cheese, which is a very young cheese. You can eat it right away, or you can seal it and let it age, and it becomes something different. So I have one that we're going to break open Super Bowl Sunday and enjoy that, and I'm going to put one away to age and see how it turns over a year to see what it turns into.
That's
so
great.
it's the neat thing about it is every culture in the world makes cheese, so you can really visit a lot of different cultures through cheese making. There's some really cool African cheeses that I've been experimenting with. I did last fall, which were incredible. I really got into the Northern African cheeses. That was a whole flight that I was doing with that. I get caught up in the Irish cheeses just because that's my family's heritage, so I enjoy doing that. But you can really, there's incredible Japanese cheeses. I haven't tried those yet. That's probably gonna be a spring fantasy for me.
Like what you're hearing? Come join Cheese Club to taste test cheeses and learn how Miss Gabriele makes them. We'll do demonstrations from time to time and learn about all different kinds of cheese. Reach out to Abby Thomas, Marguerite DeMarco, or Miss Gabriele for more details.
So our next question is, have you ever made any dishes with the cheese? And like, if you have a favorite dish with the cheese or anything like that?
Oh, that's a good question. It's funny that you asked me that because I just brought in Mr. Griffa, if you didn't know, is a very good cook, and he's always trying new recipes. He had never tried paneer, and we both are big fans of Indian cooking. And so I brought in some paneer for him to make sag paneer.
What is
which is
paneer?
it's a type of cheese that you can make it very quickly, but it needs to be eaten pretty quickly. But it holds up to heat really well, so you can saute it, and you mix it in with spinach and coconut milk and some Indian spices, and it's to die for. So I just made some sag paneer actually with Mr. Griffa virtually. He made his, I made mine. And yeah, so I love trying new dishes.
Yeah.
And I love making cheeses, regional cheeses, and then researching recipes that use those regional cheeses. So there's I think I mentioned it before, the African wagazi, which is a really interesting dish, and some of the Northern African cuisines that use it. So I've been doing a lot of reading of regional cookbooks and sort of the oral traditions in those areas, and trying those. So yeah, I always love to try some new things.
Super cool.
Yep.
Well, piggybacking off of that, have you ever made a pizza with the cheese? I feel like that's a classic.
I have made a lot of pizza. The problem is when you're making mozzarella. So mozzarella, everybody thinks, you get these cheese making kits and it's mozzarella. Mozzarella is actually a pretty difficult cheese to make and make well. And you have to use it fairly quickly. Mozzarella goes bad fairly quickly. So the thing the curse that you run into with cheese making, especially if you have a lot of milk coming your way, you to save time, you make mozzarella because it doesn't take that long. But then you end up with lots of mozzarella. So what do you make with mozzarella? You make pizza. So I feel like I'm making pizza all the time to use up the cheese before it goes bad.
Yeah.
So I do make a lot of pizza with mozzarella that I have. And the neat thing too is I think we get kind of caught up in traditional pizza. But pizza is pizza, which is obviously Italian in origin and actually American in origin. It's things like flatbreads, which are found all over the world, used all kinds of cheese for their toppings, not just mozzarella. So I would encourage you to experiment a little bit with your pizzas and try some different cheeses on them and see how you like them.
For sure.
Yep.
So do you sell your cheeses? Have you considered selling your cheeses?
Oh, I would.
Let me know how we can have your cheese.
That's a good question. I have confidence issues with my cheese. I'm always worried that it's not good enough. So I would be very nervous about selling it. I would love to give it away and have people give me some good feedback of, whether they liked it, it was too sour, it was too creamy, so I would prefer to give it away because I use raw milk. there are all sorts of regulations around selling cheese made from raw milk too. So I legally wouldn't be able to really sell it, but I would be happily legally ready to give it away. So
Well, you can give away your cheese to me
that's
anytime.
exactly right. Well, and the problem that I ran into with COVID is we had always planned all the cheese I had made. I would hope to have a nice holiday party and use it. Well, of course, there was no holiday party. So now I have about
Yeah.
100 pounds of cheese that's sitting and aging. And so I think when the COVID restrictions are lifted, there will be a very large cheese party here at St. Luke's, is my hope.
I'm looking forward to that.
Definitely.
too.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm wondering, do you make cheese that already exists, like you're following a recipe, or are you experimenting with different combinations and making like the Miss Gabrielle cheese?
The Miss Gabrielle cheese. I'm going to make a label for Miss Gabrielle cheese. I use a lot of recipes, but the thing with cheese recipes is no matter what the recipe is, the conditions on the day that you're making it can change the flavor or change nuances of the cheese. So depending upon, again, if you're using milk from a cow that you milked in the fall versus the spring, the content of fat in the milk is different, and that will make for a different textured cheese or a different flavored cheese. If it's humid or hot or cold, it all varies from time to time. So you never really know from a recipe point of view what you're going to get. That's kind of the neat thing about it as a hobby. So I do keep a lot of notes. I keep a journal of every cheese that I make, and I make sure I write down the conditions that were taking place that day when I made the cheese. So if it turns out really good, I can try and recreate it. So I do a lot of that in terms of keeping track. But simple, pH differences or again, just temperature and things like that can change cheese no matter how closely you're following a recipe.
What cheese are you thinking about trying next?
That's a good one. So I just made a cheese called a tête de moine, which is, we have to ask Mr. Shi this, but it's the head of the monk is how it's translated. And it is a French cheese. Actually, I think it's French and particularly perfected in Canada. And it's a cheese that ages for a while. You make it, and then you actually have to wash it every few days with a special wash that has some of the bacteria that you used in the cheese. So you wash down the rinds, and it creates this kind of pinkish orange crust on the cheese, which sounds gross when you're talking about cheese, but in fact, it's very good. And it's got kind of a nutty flavor to it. It's a strong, very nutty flavor, and you use a special knife to cut it, which is called a giroule. And it shaves the cheese and makes them into little roses, these beautiful rosettes of cheese that melt in your mouth when you eat them. So I am trying that right now. I've made one before that turned out, I actually made 2 from one batch. One turned out horrible, and the other one turned out great. I don't know why. So I went back and I read my notes and I tried to recreate it with this new batch. And so that I made about 2 weeks ago, and was actually washing it down this weekend. So we'll see how that works. Hopefully I'm hoping that maybe by next holiday season.
Okay.
So probably December, January, we will try and see how that goes.
Wow.
So who knows?
Yeah.
We'll see how it turns out.
In regards to the Cheese Club, during a pandemic, how is that going? Are you able to bring in cheese for people to try?
We have, and I would say it's been a little tricky, obviously, with COVID, but we have brought in some samples. We've tried. We've had a couple meetings, but it's been, if it was outside, we could do more outside. I'm hoping as spring warms up and as all these cheeses are aging, I can start bringing in some more samples and we can try them outside. But it's a fun club, and I would encourage anybody, even if I've got a couple kids who are in the Cheese Club who are lactose intolerant, which I think is great. But there's a lot of different types of cheeses you can make. You can make cashew cheeses. There are all sorts of alternatives to dairy. Although I would say that some folks who think they're lactose intolerant, often when they try really good organic grass-fed raw milk, they don't have the same issues that they have when they are buying traditional kind of pasteurized store-bought milk. So sometimes I've had a lot of friends who are lactose intolerant but have no problem eating the cheese that I make.
Wow.
So not that I'm encouraging anyone to try it and get sick, but certainly in the Cheese Club you can sample some different kinds of cheeses. And like I said, I go back to my Cheese Whiz theory that as long as you have Cheese Whiz and good friends and good setting, that's really all you need.
So apparently not all cheeses have the same amount of lactose. Is that?
That is correct.
Okay.
Lactose intolerance is a fascinating, how that was physically selected for in humans. So you have a lot of populations that traditionally are lactose intolerant, and they would sour their milk. So as the milk was warm and curdling in many ways, it would reduce the lactose acid and allow folks to eat that without having the same stomach issues that other people have. So there are certain cheeses that will actually work better for those who are lactose intolerant than those who are not. But it's old physiological condition, lactose intolerance. It's a good question for the history department.
Yes.
I love
wow.
a good compromise.
Yes, good compromise.
Okay, so we're hearing that different societies with
This just in.
cows, without cows, yaks, goats, etc., have greater tolerances to lactose. Instances of lactose
Should we
intolerance.
do it again? Okay.
Yes, it depends on so you can pretty much make cheese from most mammals. I mean, the milk that comes from yaks, that comes from, buffalo mozzarella is actually the best mozzarella in the world. That doesn't come from a cow, it's from a buffalo. So you can really, any animal, goat, some of you have probably had goat cheese before, Montrachet as it's called. So you can, there are lots of different materials, lots of milk that cheeses are made from, and so you should try different ones. Some people love cow's milk cheese but can't stand goat milk or sheep's milk. Some people don't like feta, for example. That's got a strong flavor to it. But you can do a cow's milk feta. There's a way to do that as well. So that's the neat thing with making cheese at home. You can try a lot of different things. You can mix and match, which you would not be able to do with store-bought cheese. So that's kind of the fun part about it. You can try different things and experiment and see what turns up.
Well, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Now, you've been making cheese for quite some time now.
Mhm.
Yes. What is your best cheese joke?
Best cheese joke.
Or maybe a pun, or
That's what I need Mr.
phrase,
Fendelman for. He's the
like-
pun guy. He's very good at this.
let's get cheesy.
Let's get
Or,
cheesy. Let's get cheesy. I've thought, it's not so much, I've thought about when I open my cheese store, when I retire and open my cheese store, what I will name it. And that's always, out of the way might be an interesting cheese
Okay.
name.
Because way? Yeah.
Yeah, out of the way, or so yeah. Let's get cheesy. That could be. I'll have to come up with a really good title for this name for my store.
Perhaps wheeling and dealing.
Wheeling and dealing. Wait a second. I think I've got it.
We're
Wheeling
hitting
and
something
dealing.
good here.
Wheeling and dealing. That sounds actually a lot more fun. I think that will be the name of my cheese store for sure. Staffed
love
by
it.
St. Luke's Cheese Club.
You've already got one customer.
Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect.
Well, special thanks to our guest for this episode, Miss Gabriele.
Thank you. I should ask you guys, what is your favorite cheese?
Oh.
I like a good truffle cheese.
Truffle
Oh,
cheese.
Yeah,
Excellent.
in the Bronx, there's a place called Little Italy,
Yes.
Arthur Avenue.
Arthur Avenue.
And they make such good truffle cheese.
Truffle cheese is
I'm
excellent.
obsessed.
Excellent.
So good.
Macy, how about you?
I like goat cheese.
Goat cheese?
Which I feel like is not everybody's favorite, but
That's
I love
true.
goat cheese. And I like brie.
Brie.
So I like
Excellent.
to keep it simple and put it on a Triscuit occasionally if
Okay.
I'm feeling, yeah. So
Well, I've got some camembert aging, so maybe I will bring in some camembert and see if
I'll
you
look
can
forward to
compare
that.
that to brie and see how you like it.
yes.
Perfect.
Great.
Special thanks to our guest for this episode, Miss Gabriele. Interview by
Me, Macy Millones.
and me, Catherine Clark. This episode was produced by Brian Douglas and Elise Kim, and a special thanks to Mr. Devissier and Mr. Fendelman. Audio editing by Atara Lowenberg. And as always, thanks to the SLS debate team for giving us our name, the Thunderclap.